The story begins in the dark days of World War II. Saito was a Japanese businessman who had been branded a traitor. He was being transported back to Japan alongside other prisoners. But freedom wasn't waiting for him. Slavery was. Unlike the other prisoners, Saito was kept isolated in a separate cell. After some time, guards dragged him before the ship's commander. Hatred burned in the commander's eyes. For those who betray their own country, death would be an easy punishment. And for you, I will never choose the easy way out. Just then, the door opened. Another prisoner was brought inside. His name was Bronson, a British prisoner whose heart was filled with nothing but hatred and rage toward the Japanese. A sinister smile appeared on the commander's face. From now on, these two will spend every remaining breath together. The soldiers immediately locked heavy shackles around their legs, chaining the two men together. Bronson screamed in fury. "Kill me if you want, but don't chain me to this Japanese man." His voice echoed against the cold walls before disappearing into silence. This was their fate. Or perhaps something even worse was waiting for them. Then suddenly, the sound of gunfire tore across the ocean. The ship violently shook. The enemy had attacked. Chaos erupted everywhere. Prisoners began to revolt. Bullets flew through the air. Screams filled the corridors. Smoke swallowed the ship as it turned into a battlefield. In the middle of the chaos, Bronson and Saito managed to break free. They joined the other prisoners in the fight. But then a submarine appeared nearby. A missile was fired directly at the ship. Boom! The explosion shook everything. When the smoke cleared, only a few officers, and the two prisoners still chained together, were left alive. The commanding officer pulled out his gun. His eyes made one thing clear. Nobody was going to survive. But at that exact moment, Bronson grabbed Saito. And together, they jumped overboard. The ship exploded into a massive fireball behind them. For hours, they fought against the waves. Eventually, despite being barely alive himself, Bronson managed to drag Saito onto a deserted island. Completely exhausted, he collapsed onto the sand. The next day, Saito opened his eyes. One question immediately entered his mind. Was everything that happened just a nightmare? Or was the real nightmare only beginning? Saito looked down at his legs. His blood ran cold. The chain was still there. This wasn't a dream. It was real. He quickly shook Bronson. "Wake up! Wake up!" But Bronson remained unconscious. Then Saito noticed something on the shoreline. The waves had washed the body of a dead soldier onto the beach. Saito cautiously approached the body. He found a gun. A dangerous thought entered his mind. If he killed Bronson right now, he might finally be free. He raised the gun. But just before he could pull the trigger, Bronson suddenly opened his eyes. He attacked Saito with lightning speed. The two men crashed into each other. A brutal fight erupted in the sand and shallow water. Then, a terrifying scream echoed from the depths of the ocean. Both men froze. Bronson tried to push Saito into the water. Saito's injured leg slammed against something hard. Blood began to flow. And the smell of blood awakened something in the darkness. The surface of the water trembled. A shadow moved rapidly toward them. Suddenly, the creature burst from the water and grabbed Bronson. Sharp claws, lightning-fast movements, eyes filled with hunger. Saito raised the gun. He aimed at Bronson first. Maybe this was his chance to finally become free. But his finger trembled. He pulled the trigger toward the creature instead. Bang! The bullet struck its chest. The creature screamed in pain and disappeared beneath the water. Saito had just saved the man he hated. Both men now understood something. Whatever hatred existed between them, there was something far more dangerous on this island. They had no choice. They needed each other to survive. Bronson asked what the creature was, but the language barrier stood between them. Saito pretended not to understand. Yet his expression made one thing obvious. He knew something about the mysterious creature. For a while, Saito remained silent. Slowly, his courage began to disappear. He started believing that their deaths were inevitable. Then Bronson looked at him angrily. "Are you crazy? This isn't the time to give up." He pulled out his last bullet and placed it in Sato's hand. "We fight that monster together. Otherwise, it will never leave us alone." Meanwhile, the waves washed more supplies onto the beach. The two men collected whatever they could find. Bronson discovered a pack of cigarettes. He offered one to Saito. Saito refused. Then Bronson noticed the body of a young soldier. He stopped. His face turned pale. Slowly, tears began running down his cheek. He was just a kid. His whole life was ahead of him. Saito couldn't understand the words, but he understood the pain in Bronson's eyes. Without saying anything, he handed him some water. For the first time, they were no longer just enemies. That night, they built a small camp. Bronson tried to put on his shoe, but the chain around his leg caused unbearable pain. He couldn't get it on. Saito looked down at his own feet. He had taken a large pair of boots from a dead soldier. Without saying a word, he handed one boot to Bronson. For the first time, there was no hatred in their eyes, only the hope of staying alive. But Bronson refused. He didn't want anything belonging to a Japanese soldier. Saito said nothing. Instead, he caught several crabs and placed them in front of Bronson. Bronson had been starving for days. He hesitated, but hunger won. He reached for one. It slipped from his hand and fell into the dirt. Without thinking, Saito gave him his own. Bronson finally accepted it. The moment he took a bite, surprise and relief appeared on his face. Slowly, their relationship began to change. Bronson started telling Saito about himself. Saito couldn't understand everything, but he understood enough. The distance between them was disappearing. Then they turned their attention to the chains. Bronson tried to break them. He failed. Saito pointed toward a weak section. Bronson understood. He struck it twice. The chain loosened. Saito took the weapon. Bronson laughed nervously. "Brother, I can't watch this. I'm covering my eyes." Saito laughed. One final strike. Crack. The chain broke. Bronson was free. He jumped up and hugged Saito. For the first time, they celebrated together. Their celebration didn't last long. Something moved in the darkness. Saito sensed a shadow nearby. Both men grabbed their weapons, but the creature disappeared. Then they found strange tracks in the sand. Suddenly, 2 Japanese soldiers appeared. And with them was another prisoner. Bronson's heart began pounding. He feared Saito would abandon him. But Saito gave him a subtle signal. "Trust me." He handed his weapon to Bronson. "Hide." Saito stayed behind. The soldiers approached the camp. One of them smelled the food. He moved closer. Then Saito stepped forward. "Don't shoot." The soldiers didn't know Saito had already been declared a traitor. Because of that, they began to trust him. But Bronson had no idea that the real danger was standing directly behind him. The soldiers questioned Saito. Did anyone else survive? Saito calmly answered that only they had survived. Then one soldier noticed something strange. He pulled away the cloth around Saito's leg. The chain marks were obvious. They immediately realized the truth. "You were the traitor. Where is the escaped prisoner?" Saito lied. "He's dead." He pointed toward a grave. But the soldiers didn't believe him. One of them drew his sword. "You're not just a traitor. You're a liar too." Then suddenly, the entire island shook. A terrifying roar echoed through the jungle. Everyone froze. The prisoner collapsed to his knees. "That's not human. God help us." One soldier ordered the youngest man to investigate. The young soldier cautiously moved through the jungle. He eventually reached Bronson's hiding place. Bronson accidentally stepped on a dry branch. Crack. The soldier turned. But before he could investigate, the creature growled. Terrified, the soldier ran. He reached the entrance of a cave. He had no idea the creature was hiding inside. Bronson tried to save him. But it was too late. The creature exploded from the darkness. The soldier swung his sword. A horrible crack followed. His arm broke. His scream echoed across the island. Another soldier heard the scream. He charged toward Saito. But Bronson attacked first. He took the soldier down. Before Bronson could fire another shot, the creature emerged from the cave. It grabbed the wounded soldier. Then it threw his severed head toward them. The head landed at their feet. The creature screamed. Saito and Bronson froze. Then they ran. The creature finished off the wounded soldier. The other prisoner tried to escape. He became its next victim. From a distance, Saito and Bronson watched in horror. They finally understood. Staying here meant death. The creature had already sensed them. Its terrifying eyes locked onto them. Then it charged. Saito and Bronson ran into the jungle. Saito used his machete to cut through thick vines and bushes. Bronson shouted that he had a plan. They needed to stop and fight. But the language barrier returned. Saito didn't understand. He kept running. Bronson fell behind. The creature attacked him. Bronson raised his gun. Bang! The bullet disappeared into the darkness. His last hope was gone. The creature grabbed him by the throat. It was about to kill him. Then Saito came back. He attacked with everything he had. Bronson was freed. They ran again. But their luck ran out. They slipped on a dangerous slope. Both men tumbled down the mountain. They slammed into rocks and were badly injured. The next morning, they woke up covered in blood and pain. A sharp piece of debris was lodged in Sato's chest. He pulled it out. Nearby, Bronson was lying on a rotten tree trunk above a waterfall. The trunk shifted. Bronson lost his balance. He fell. He slammed into a rock and disappeared beneath the water. His breathing stopped, but somehow, he found the strength to swim back to shore. Now they were completely separated. And the creature was still hunting them. Saito found a katana beside the body of a dead soldier. Bronson continued climbing through the jungle. Eventually, he reached a massive waterfall. He was exhausted. But he refused to give up. Then he heard something. Rustling. Water moving. Bronson slowly climbed out of the deeper water. He felt something cold nearby. He turned his head. A massive crocodile was only a few feet away. Bronson froze. He held his breath. The crocodile stared at him. Then, incredibly, it turned around and disappeared into the water. Bronson slowly stood up. But then he saw the creature. This time, something was different. The creature was treating its own wound. Bronson stared in disbelief. This wasn't a mindless animal. It could think. It could understand. It could heal itself. It had intelligence, maybe even intelligence similar to a human. Bronson knew he had to tell Saito. But suddenly, a noise escaped him. He hid behind the bushes. The creature slowly walked toward the river. Then, a massive crocodile exploded from the water. It attacked the creature. The two monsters disappeared beneath the surface. The water quickly turned red. Bronson watched in horror. Then the creature emerged. With terrifying strength, it tore the crocodile apart. Blood and flesh scattered through the water. Bronson's blood ran cold. The creature screamed. And the sound traveled across the jungle, straight toward Saito. Saito was searching for Bronson. Then he noticed a body hanging between the trees. He stumbled backward. And fell into a deep pit. Inside was the severed head of one of the creatures. Its eyes were still partially open. Saito stared at it. Then fear turned into hope. If one of these creatures could be killed, maybe the others could be defeated too. He climbed out. Nearby, he found a rusty gun. Now he had a katana and a pistol. For the first time, Saito wanted to become the hunter. He continued through the jungle. Then he noticed something half submerged in the water. A crashed airplane. Saito entered the wreckage. The smell of decay filled the dark interior. At the same time, Bronson reached the same plane. Before entering, he built a makeshift weapon from broken metal. Inside, he found a flare gun, a lighter, cigarettes, and other supplies. Then he saw something terrifying. A bomb was trapped inside the plane's wing. Bronson stared at it. A dangerous idea formed in his mind. He lit a cigarette. Then he heard footsteps. He turned. Saito was standing in the doorway. His face was pale. He was shaking. "Why are you trembling?" Bronson offered him a cigarette. Saito refused. "I need to show you something." Saito used his lighter to signal toward the darkness. Together, they entered a cave. And what they saw inside changed everything. Inside the cave was a massive female creature. It was sitting over its eggs, protecting them. Its red eyes burned in the darkness. Bronson slowly raised his weapon. But Saito grabbed his arm. "She's a mother. She'll become a nightmare if we threaten her home and her babies. Stay away." Bronson's eyes filled with anger. "I can't leave her alive. Either she dies, or we do." Saito warned him. "If we kill the female, the entire pack will go insane. They'll never stop hunting us." But Bronson ignored him. Then he smiled. "Let's beat them with their own strength." He showed Saito the bomb. "Help me carry this into the center of the cave." The two men struggled to drag it inside. But the trigger was damaged. Saito's face turned pale. It could explode at any moment. "We need to get out." Bronson tried to repair it. Then a massive roar echoed through the cave. The female was coming back. "The emergency hammer is inside the plane," Bronson said. "It might work. But someone has to stay here." Saito took a deep breath. "This happened because of me. I should stay." But there was no time. The female's roar shook the cave. Both men ran. Bronson fired a flare. The cave walls turned red. Saito stayed behind. Bronson fought desperately to free the emergency hammer from the wreckage. Then, a massive shadow appeared in front of Saito. Saito drew his katana. He charged. Metal collided with claws. Sparks flew. The creature wasn't attacking randomly. Every move was calculated. Every strike was deadly. Meanwhile, Bronson continued fighting with the emergency hammer. Finally, crack! The hammer came loose. Saito delivered one final strike. He pushed the creature toward the plane. Bronson rushed forward. Together, they fought the monster. For a moment, they trapped it. Then they looked toward the sky. The flare was dying. They looked back. The creature was gone. Both men rushed toward the cave. Saito guarded the entrance. Bronson worked on the bomb. Suddenly, the creature attacked from behind. It jumped onto Bronson. Saito reacted instantly. He drove a blade into its chest, but the creature grabbed him. It slammed him against the cave wall. Then it attacked Bronson. Bronson was badly wounded. Saito somehow stood again. He grabbed his gun and fired directly into the creature's eye. The creature screamed. It released Bronson. Saito fired again. He missed. Then he changed his aim. He fired at the egg. Boom! The egg exploded. The baby creature fell to the ground. The mother went completely berserk. Saito rushed toward Bronson. But Bronson was barely alive. He handed all his remaining supplies to Saito. Go. Get out of here. Saito looked at him with tears in his eyes, but he had no choice. He left his friend behind. The female creature sat beside her baby. Bronson lay on the ground, barely breathing. He knew his time was running out. With the last of his strength, he activated the bomb. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Nothing happened. The bomb didn't explode. Saito suddenly remembered what Bronson had shown him. He followed the instructions. He made the final adjustment. Boom! A massive explosion tore through the island. Fire and smoke rose into the sky. Saito watched from a distance. He had lost his friend. For a moment, he couldn't even scream. Then, a terrifying roar echoed through the jungle. The creature was still alive. And now it was coming straight for him. Saito ran through the bushes. The female creature chased him. He reached the shoreline. He dropped to his knees. For a moment, he completely broke down. Bronson's sacrifice burned inside him, but his grief turned into anger. Saito stood up. He would fight. The creature charged. Saito pretended to be weak. As it lowered itself to attack, Saito suddenly rose from the sand. He attacked. The creature struck back. Saito was injured, but he refused to stop. He screamed, "Your baby is dead. Now it's your turn." The creature lunged. Saito drove his blade into its abdomen. The creature stumbled, then collapsed. Saito approached. He raised his sword toward its neck, but at the last moment, he stopped. Saito drove his sword into the ground beside the creature. Then he stepped back. He grabbed the flare gun. He knew this was his final chance. He raised the flare, took a deep breath, and fired. A bright red and yellow light shot into the sky. It exploded above the dark ocean. A signal. A final call for help. Saito collapsed. When he finally opened his eyes, he was aboard an American ship. An officer sat across from him. Beside the officer was a Japanese translator. The officer stared at Saito. "Did Bronson help you?" Saito remained silent. Memories of his friend flooded his mind. The battles, the suffering, the sacrifices, and the friendship that had survived until the very end. The officer asked the translator. "Ask him what his crime was." Saito answered in a heavy voice. "I killed my own commander. He was sending all of us toward a useless death." The room became silent. Then the officer mentioned Bronson's name. Saito lowered his head. "We were enemies, but by the end, we became true friends." The officer asked one final question. "Is anyone else alive on that island?" Saito finally broke his silence. "No. There's nobody left." The ship sailed farther away from the island. Saito stood near the window. He watched the blue ocean disappearing behind them. But there was one truth he never revealed. The island wasn't empty. The creatures were still alive. And there were more of them. Many more. Some were even more dangerous. The camera slowly rises above the island. The jungle stretches endlessly beneath the darkness. Everything looks silent, peaceful. But deep inside the forest, something moves. Then, that same terrifying roar echoes through the trees. A sound that seems to shake the entire island. The creatures are still there, waiting, hunting. And now, the island belongs to them. The war may have ended for Saito, but the nightmare on that island has only just begun. And that's where this terrifying story ends. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you in the next video with another thrilling story.